Welcome, everyone. This is the meeting of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council's Technical Committee, the BRTB. And this is our May meeting. This will happen to end with a closed session to discuss upcoming RFPs. The meeting is, of course, being recorded. If anyone online should experience difficulties, please send a message in the chat box, or if that doesn't work, contact the BMC office. And so at this time, I'd ask Rebecca Dybel to start the roll call to determine member participation.
Good morning.
Morning.
1 second, please.
Sure. Take your time.
Thanks. City of Annapolis.
Present.
Thank you. Anne Arundel County.
Here.
Baltimore City.
Present.
Baltimore County. Carroll County. Harford County.
Present.
Queen Anne's County.
Present.
MDOT.
Here.
Maryland Department of Environment.
Here.
Maryland Department of Planning.
Good morning, Kencho is here.
Good morning. MDOT MTA. MDOT SHA. Did I miss anyone?
MPA, Maryland Port Administration.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
And David joined from Howard County.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you. Sorry.
Morning. Our last meeting was on April 4th, and we're here today to approve the minutes from that meeting. Has anyone had a chance to review or has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
This is Dan at MDOT. I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Thanks, Dan. Second.
Annapolis, second.
Thank you, Kwaku. Were there any questions or concerns about the minutes? Okay. We'll now vote on the approval of the minutes. Members in support of the minutes may say aye.
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 Members that are not in support, please say nay. Okay. The minutes are approved. We'll now move on to the action items for the day. So for the next resolution, which happens to involve a request to amend the 23-20 to 26 tip, Keith Kucharik is going to introduce the resolution with some background.
Thank you, Joel. Good morning, everybody. As Joel said, in resolution 23-21, Howard County is requesting to amend the 23 to 26 tip to add one new project. Patapsco Regional Greenway, Elk Ridge to Guinness section is part of the overall 40-mile greenway that runs from the Inner Harbor to Baltimore, in Baltimore City to Sykesville in Carroll County. And adding this project to the 23 to 26 tip is necessary for us to complete the NEPA documentation. The interagency consultation group has already reviewed this project at its April 5th meeting, and it determined it to be exempt according to the conformity rule. So Mr. David Cookson will present the details. Unless, David, you want me to do it, that's entirely up to you.
Yeah, Keith, if you don't mind, go ahead and do it. You probably have a little bit more background and since you the presentation. Sorry about that.
Sure, not a problem. So as I said, this amendment is for the Patapsco Regional Greenway, Elk Ridge to Guinness Open Gate Brewery that is partially in Howard County, but predominantly in Baltimore County. Next slide. As I said earlier, the purpose of this amendment is to add the project in order for to get NEPA approval. This amendment includes $1.25 million in a Howard County DPW grant that will be used for construction. And additionally, the amendment includes $500,000 from Baltimore County that was committed to completing engineering. So the total estimated cost shown on the tip sheet is $1.9 million. That only accounts for the Howard County grant, the Baltimore County funds for engineering, and $150,000 that was spent to produce the 30% plans. So additional funding will be needed to fully fund construction as we move forward. Next slide. So this is just a quick map of the location. As I said, the bulk of the trail is in Baltimore County with a small portion and mainly on road section in the Howard County area of Elkridge. So again, this is a $1.5 million or 1.5 mile, excuse me, hard surface trail that starts or ends, depending on which way you look at it, at the Guinness Open Gate Brewery in Baltimore County and runs under I-895 towards the Patapsco River. And then it turns and crosses under I-195 and back up towards the I-895 ramp to Route 1. From there, it crosses into Howard County along a 290-foot boardwalk that spans some significant wetlands in that area, and then a bridge over the Patapsco River where it intersects Main Street, and finally turns up onto Levering Avenue into historic Elkridge. So 30% design was completed in 2021. The schedule we're hoping to follow has us completing semifinal plans, which are 60% design, sometime in August or September of this year. 90% completion or final review will be is scheduled for winter of 2024. So that could be, and then with 100% design completion in the spring of 2024. So again, construction isn't scheduled yet. That'll be dependent on additional funding and county sponsorship for what we anticipate will be a TAP project, transportation project. So I think that's all I have for this project. I think most everybody's pretty familiar with the Patapsco Regional Greenway. So this segment was presented up to 30% a long time ago. So now we're just doing the final completion. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, I'll ask for questions when we get a motion on the table.
Sure. So the next slide is just Howard County's contact, but feel free to contact me, either me or Sheila Mahoney from our office as well, who's the co-project manager here at BMC.
Okay. All right. So I'll now ask for a member to move for approval of resolution 2321 and then a second. May I have a motion?
Annapolis moved for approval.
Seconded.
All right, thank you, Pat, for the second with MDOT and MTA and Kwaku. Thank you. All right, and so does any member of the technical committee have any questions or comments on this resolution? All right. Also, we might have a member of the public that has a question about this item. Is there any messages in the chat box or?
I do not have any at this time.
Okay, all right. All right, well then we'll now vote on approval of the resolution to amend the TIP to include this segment of the Patapsco Regional Greenway. When your name is read, please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, could you please go through the roll for the vote?
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County, Carroll County, Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT.
Aye.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for that presentation and the vote. Item number 3. This is recommended action on resolution 2322. Yeah, numbers are so close. I was making sure we didn't have a mistake there. For information on this resolution, we go back to the well with Mr. Kucharik to begin the discussion.
Thank you again, Joel. In resolution 23-22, the Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Port Administration is requesting to amend the 2023 to 2026 tip to add one new project. Masonville Cove Connector Shared Use Path Design and Construction is an approximately 2-mile trail along Frankfurt Avenue between Masonville Cove and Hanover Street. Adding this project to the 2023 to 2026 tip is necessary in order to utilize federal lands access program or FLAP grant funds. Matching funds are being provided by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the form of a federal lands transportation program grant. This project also has been reviewed by the interagency consultation group at its April 5th meeting, and it was determined to be exempt according to the conformity rule as well. And for the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Joseph Ross and Mr. Andrew Bing, and they'll give you a brief overview of the project.
Thanks, Keith. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Ross, project manager with Maryland Port Administration. Excuse me, I want to thank you all for just giving us some time to present on the TIP project with our Masonville Cove Connector. You know, we're in the early phases of project development, and we're kind of just looking at some different things and concepts and the way to kind of improve the corridor along Frankfurt Avenue, just kind of make it a more user-friendly apparatus in terms of just navigating toward the Masonville Cove Connector, toward Masonville Cove, and just providing equal and equitable access and safe access to those community members. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our project delivery team lead, Mr. Andrew Bing, and he can kind of walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Joe. If you could go to the next slide. So I think this was kind of summed up, but we'll go through this just quickly. So there was a feasibility study earlier that was part of the 2017 to 2020 TIP. Again, that feasibility study did use this Federal Highway Administration Federal Lands Access Program. I'll refer to it as FLAP grant. So as Joe was saying, we're in the early stages of designing and constructing a shared use path, which is known as the Masonville Cove Connector, along Frankfurt Avenue, Baltimore City. This is going to connect Masonville Cove. I hope everyone's had some opportunity to get out to Masonville Cove. If you haven't, it's a wonderful spot that should be on your destination spot to go visit. It's the nation's first urban wildlife refuge partnership. So we're going to connect from Masonville Cove down towards Hanover Street. Next slide, please. So we were then awarded an additional FLAP grant for the design and construction of this Masonville Cove Connector. You know, under FLAP, we require that TIP amendment, as Keith said, to move in from concept into implementation. You know, with this project, it's really going to include everything in the cost of project planning, NEPA, right-of-way, construction, and other project costs. So that's kind of the purpose of the amendment. And I'll just go into the project a little bit in the next slide. And again, this is intended to be a very high-level overview. If anyone at the end has any more detailed questions, please let me know. You can kind of see, I don't have access to the cursor, but you can see the 2 green arrows on either side of the screen on the right. There we go. Yep, is where Masonville Cove is. And then all the way to the left is getting towards the Hanover Street Bridge and 2nd Street, the green arrow on the left. So this is a Baltimore City owned roadway, Frankfurt Avenue. The other thing that's important to notice on this slide is at the bottom part, you can see 895 as well as the CSX railroad tracks. So even though we have this wonderful, great open green oasis of Masonville Cove, it's very difficult for anyone in the community to get to because of all the infrastructure. And so the purpose of Masonville Cove connector has always been to try to increase access to local communities and also connect to other trail networks throughout the city. And so those are kind of the barriers we're trying to overcome through this project. Next slide, please. So as Joe said, why are we building it? We want to establish a safe, convenient, and equitable access to the Masonville Cove Environmental Education Center, connect local communities to unique recreational asset, as well as connect to other trails. So the Greater Baybrook Alliance is in the process of building their Baybrook connector, which would connect all the way to BWI Airport. And then we also want to connect to the Gwynns Falls Trail, which ends at MedStar Harbor Hospital. So you can see on that lower left diagram, the red line indicates our proposed Masonville Cove connector. The orange line is the proposed Baybrook connector, and the yellow line is the existing Gwynns Falls Trail. So it's kind of a dual purpose of both connecting to other trail networks, but really connecting to the local communities, such as Brooklyn and other communities, to give them access to Masonville Cove. Next slide. So our kind of always moving project schedule, we started last fall. We are hoping for 30% design to be complete fall of 23, 100% design fall of 24, and if all goes well, fall of 2025 construction would be complete. As I mentioned, if you can go to the next slide, we do have that's our projected costs right there. And you can see on the bottom, we do have a little over 1.5 million that was awarded through the FLAP grant. So that is what we are working our way through, 30% design and 100% design. But we will need more funds to actually get all the way through 100% design and through construction. I think that's my last slide, but yep. So happy to take questions. Joe and I are happy to take questions if anyone has any.
I'll ask for questions after we get the motion on the table.
Yep. Good point.
Which is fine.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you both. That's a great presentation. I'll now ask for a member to move for approval of resolution 2322 and then a second.
Winans County will make a motion to approve.
Seconded by Baltimore City.
All righty. Thank you so much, both of you. Now, are there any members of the technical committee that have questions or comments on the resolution?
Yes, this is Tavon Hawkins from M.SHA.
Yep.
Just a quick question. Is the cove open to the public now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joe, do you want to give the hours and days?
Yeah, I can actually look it up a little bit. It's usually weekdays. I have to look up the.
I'm pretty sure it's like 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday.
Yep.
There are special occasions that are out there where it'll be open on other days, but it is open to the public. It serves a lot of school kids. Learning Classrooms operates out of the building, and so there's constantly school bus field trips coming out there. But there are all sorts of different activities on weekends for both kids and adults. Birding, wildlife tours, all sorts, access to the water. Encourage people to go to the website to learn about different activities that are there. Bring your family out and enjoy it. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but for those who have visited New York City and you kind of go into Central Park and you're like, I can't believe I'm in the middle of this park in the middle of the city. I feel like when you go to Masonville Cove, you're in the middle of South Baltimore and you're walking through there and you feel like you're a million miles away from the city in a sense. It's just nature at its best.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking a little bit about this because, and particularly the use of the FLAP funding, because, when you plan long enough, eventually you see things come to fruition. And I remember being on this committee and hearing a presentation about how most of the flap funding in the United States is going west. And so I really wanted to congratulate you guys for bringing some of that funding to this MPO. Hopefully we can see other projects. I know we have military bases in the area. So hopefully we can see other projects that access this funding.
Just thank you, Joel. I can speak to that a little bit actually. It's a very dynamic project. It has a lot of EJ benefits to it as well as flap benefits. So we were definitely proud to kind of carry this as a flagship project for the local region.
And I would just add that we did, there was an additional round of flap funding that we did apply for that is pending right now. We're hoping to receive part or all of our requests to help fill in that gap with the 100% design and construction. But as of right now, they have not made a final decision on that.
And for those on this call, the link to the website has been dropped in the chat box.
There we go.
I'm just putting some specific hours down. I just wanted to, in case anybody wanted to go, I'm just fitting the actual hours. Saturday is 9 to 1, like Andrew mentioned, and 9 to 4, Monday through Friday. So feel free to kind of enjoy yourselves. There's picnic tables and everything, nice trails you can walk on. It's a very, very family friendly environment.
That's great. All right, well, any other questions? Well, then we should also take a moment in case there's any members of the public that have questions or comments on this resolution. I see some things in the chat, but I think they're all between the group. Yeah.
Daniel, do you want to read your comment out loud from the
Oh,
chat
yeah,
box?
Sure. Yeah, this is Daniel Pascal with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. I'm the Mid-Atlantic manager. I wanted to thank everyone for their support for this and appreciate the project. I think this is a great example of creating, kind of tying into the larger active transportation and recreation network, building off the work of the Baybrook connector as mentioned and the reimagined middle branch. Giving people that really need access to these amazing spaces. So thank you so much for your work on it.
Great. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, we're in the early parts of planning, and as much as projects seem great, they always face certain obstacles as they go and different interests. And we certainly would not turn away any support from anyone as we move forward in our planning, because we will need all of that support to, as we come out with designs and ideas and concepts. We definitely will need the support of people like the East Coast Greenways and others on this call.
Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out, support letters, whatever you need. We have lots of examples. I've been based in Philadelphia, and there's also the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, and there's certainly access issues there, a similar kind of setting in Southwest Philly to this part of Baltimore. So I see a lot of examples too to try to help leverage case studies if that's helpful. So yeah, whatever you need, I'll put my email in the chat.
Actually, would you mind? I know we went over our 5 minutes. Could you just send Joe his emails on this on this page right here? Could you maybe just send him your contact information just so we get it?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. We love all input.
I think that was a supportive bark.
That's great. Yeah, and if anybody hasn't had a chance to talk to Dan, he's a great resource. Says he's from Philadelphia, but it seems to me like he lives right around the corner. He knows so much about this region. So it's great. All righty. Well, then we have the motion on the table. And so we'll now vote for approval of the resolution from M.MPA to amend the 23-26 TIF for the Masonville Cove Connector project. So we'll go through the roll again with Rebecca. And when you hear your name, say aye or nay. Rebecca, if you could take it away.
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County, Carroll County, Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
and MDOT.
Aye.
All right, the resolution is passed. Congratulations. And the next item is something we have to attend to every once in a while. We've got to put together the nominating committee for new technical committee officers. I think I would be remiss to not mention how useful the experience has been for me to serve as chair and the vice chair before that. So start thinking about giving some time back and doing this. It's a great opportunity, and the staff make it very easy. I'll be asking to appoint a nominating committee today to recommend a slate of officers for fiscal year 24. I'm asking MDOT and Howard County to develop the slate of officers. Do you accept that opportunity? MDOT and Howard County?
Yeah,
Howard
this is
County?
Dan from MDOT. Yes, I accept.
That's great. I really appreciate it. And I heard
And Joel,
Dave
David.
accept-
Yeah,
Yep.
David from Howard County here. Yes, that would be great. Thanks.
Great. So my term is limited and I'll be stepping down. So please have the nominating committee chair talk with the vice chair about interest in stepping up. Any members who wish to serve as vice chair, reach out to Regina and share your interest. It's a great way that we do this. We bring new people in through the vice chair position. So by the time we get around to nominating chair, we have somebody who's got enough experience with it. So in June, the slate will be selected and then a vote be held in the beginning of the July meeting in time for the new fiscal year. So in the meantime, please reach out to the nominating committee if you like, or see what we can do. Were there any questions or concerns about the nominating committee? Did I hear something? It was just a stray mic. All righty. Well, now we'll switch to another topic. This is one that's sort of near and dear to my heart, the US 40 pedestrian concept plan. So Ms. Charlene Mingus is with us today, and she'll introduce the AECOM team who will present a summary of the concept plan.
Good morning, my name is Charlene Mingus. I'm the active transportation planner at BMC, and we've been supporting our local partner, Harford County, working closely with Joel and Deborah and Alex by developing a bicycle and pedestrian concept plan for US 40 in Harford County along an approximately 5-mile stretch from the cities of Aberdeen to Habitat Grace. The goal of the project was to create a concept plan for a bike ped connection that is comfortable, convenient, and safe, and which will increase connections to transit, neighborhoods, schools, and other community resources. I'd like to take this time to thank Harford County for their support with this project. And then now I'll hand it off to the design team to present. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Charlene. My name is Josh Cronkleton. I'm a transportation planner with AECOM, and we worked with BMC on this concept plan along US 40. I have a brief presentation here, a summary that I'll go through, and here we go. Project overview, as Charlene mentioned, it's a roughly 5-mile corridor from US 40 from the Aberdeen train station to Erie Street and Havertide Grace, ending just west of the Thomas Hayden Bridge. The goal was a concept level design of a comfortable, convenient, and safe shared use path along US 40 that connects to transit and neighborhoods. Here we have some existing conditions photos showing some views of the US 40 corridor. Showing bicycle and pedestrian activity. You see some wide shoulder space on US 40, the sidewalk with some of the potential constraints that are existing with utility poles. We have a photo of underneath the Maryland 22 overpass, and then some other pedestrian activity along some of the wide shoulders on US 40. An overview of the concept design. This was high level, planning level study. No detailed topographic survey was obtained at this point. It's a recommended 10-foot wide shared use path paved, separated from the roadway, with curb ramps meeting all ADA standards and PED signals upgraded with audible signals and countdown displays. As I mentioned previously, the eastern terminus at Erie Street in Havre de Grace, just west of the Hayden Bridge, instead of ending at the Hayden Bridge itself. Here's an example of a typical section that was used for the study. Existing typical section of US 40 on top with our proposed typical section on the bottom. This is an example of an open typical section without curb and gutter. And this is generally in the middle of the corridor in between Aberdeen and Havre de Grace. You see the 10-foot wide shared use path separated by a wide grass swale drainage area adjacent to the US 40. So for this study, we looked at 3 options at first, a westbound option on the northern side of US 40, an eastbound option on the southern side of US 40, and then a combined option, which was a mixture of the two. The eastbound option on the southern side of US 40 was not recommended for further study due to some environmental design constraints, public feedback, and significant Amtrak property feedbacks, to name a few. The 2 preferred concepts that were recommended for additional study were the westbound option on the northern side of US 40, and the combined option on the northern side of US 40 from Aberdeen up to Lewis Lane and Havre de Grace, crossing at Lewis Lane, and then continuing on the eastbound side up to Erie Street. And just to note that any shared use path along US 40 could then act as a spine branching off to other connections as available throughout the US 40 corridor. Here's an example of one of the concept plan sheets. We had 9 of these sheets for the entire corridor. This is just one of the sheets as a brief example, showing the kind of information that we were visualizing. The proposed typical section for each of the plan sheets, some photos, along with some call-out boxes showing potential crossing locations, connections to area facilities such as the on-road East Coast Greenway route. And this one is interesting. As I mentioned, the project terminus was Erie Street, but based on some of our advisory committee feedback, we extended this piece. We have a spur along Park Drive on the eastern end that connects over to Superior Street, and that was based on some feedback received where the public, members of the public coming from downtown Havre de Grace, biking or walking up Superior Street would be able to more easily access the trail along Park Drive instead of having to cross US 40 itself to access the trail on this side of the road. So this is just an example of some of the design alterations that we took as a result of some of the feedback we received along the way. Next, please. We took a look at preliminary impacts and costs of the 2 preferred alternatives. In terms of impacts, no anticipated county, MDOT/SHA, or Amtrak property impacts for these 2 alternatives. And then potential impacts to the city of Aberdeen, city of Havre de Grace, residential, commercial, and industrial properties may possibly be minimized or avoided completely in the future, in future stages of design, once we have topographic surveys and can adjust the design as appropriate. In terms of preliminary costs, I'm sorry, back one. In terms of preliminary costs, not including right-of-way, the westbound option on the northern side of US 40 came in at $8.90 million with a cost per mile of 1.78. The combined option was slightly higher at $9.75 million with a cost per mile of 1.95 million. In addition to our steering committee and advisory committees that met with us along the way, we also did meet with the public twice during this process. And just as a brief example of some of the feedback we received, would you use a shared use path along US 40? 73% of the public commenting said they were likely to use that. Which shared use path option is preferred? 69% voted for the combined option, which is partially westbound and partially eastbound options crossing at Lewis Lane. Some key themes that came out of public feedback: users should be safely separated from US 40 traffic, which we took into account with our typical section showing that wide green space drainage area between US 40 and the shared use path, and that it's important to provide safe pedestrian and bicycle crossings of US 40 at the major intersections. Moving forward, recommendations for future study. Both of the two preferred options are recommended to be carried forward into the next phase of design, just because additional information will be needed to fully consider the pros and cons of those two options to determine the best available design. Future phases of design need to consider topographic survey, additional engineering details, and public comments in order to tweak the shared use path alignments, avoid impacts, maximize the distance or offset between US 40 and the shared use path, and also connections to other facilities. To help phase the design and construction of this 5 miles long, Harford County, Aberdeen, and Havre de Grace could identify priority segments for the shared use path, and it could be constructed potentially incrementally with each segment not precluding other sections. So priority segments. And then also a recommendation for future studies to continue to explore bike and ped crossing opportunities across the Susquehanna to further improve regional connectivity. As part of the final report, we also had an implementation plan section where we touched on a few of the things shown on this slide here. Potential grant funding opportunities, federal and state, public and private, potential wayfinding, facility branding strategies. Well, sorry there, I think I got cut off.
Yeah, not sure what happened there. Let me bring this back up. Okay, can you pick it up from here, Josh?
I can. Where did I get cut off? Right when I was talking about long-term maintenance strategy?
I believe so.
Okay. And then the last piece here is a long-term maintenance strategy that we touched on to help avoid deferred maintenance issues for the future shared use path. And just to note that in this case, the local jurisdiction, Harford County, is typically responsible for maintaining a shared use path along a state roadway. And that was it.
We almost made it.
Right. I'll turn it back over to Charlene.
Thank you, Josh. Wanted to know if you guys had any questions. And the last slide of this includes contact information if you think of a question after today. But does anybody have any questions or comments?
I'd mention a few things if no one else has anything. I think I think this is an important project for BMC overall because you know, you can see how we set it up. It involves 2 municipalities in the county, but it also is potentially connecting to Baltimore County through, you know, the other sections of 40 and Howard. And you know, years ago they referred to 40 as America's Main Street, and it is a highway, and so the experience of the pedestrian and the bicyclist is challenging. And I think this gives us a very eye-opening look at how to deal with 40. It could also be similar thinking for, you know, one in some of the member jurisdictions. And so I hope that this can serve as a template, and as much as it can also serve as guidance for specific project as shown. Any other thoughts or questions? We don't have to vote on this today, but oh, it looks like Dan, you want to just share your thoughts? I see.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just echoing the support for the project, and appreciate again the work done on this. You know, I've been with the Greenway for almost 6 years and been trying to troubleshoot how do we find traffic separated connections for people of all ages and abilities, across Maryland, and especially in Hartford County. How do you get from Havre de Grace and the Susquehanna River crossing, which is a whole other challenge of itself. But to build that pressure for crossing, you need real connections to and from Havre de Grace and connect across, the development corridor of US 40. And I know there's been major support in Havre de Grace with planners. Diane Claire has pushed for more walkable development. And it's something that, especially as we think about ways to reduce emissions from transportation, you really need to have these safe connections and make it something that's not just safe, but comfortable. And that's a longer term project, but this is the start of that. So I really appreciate this work. And maybe one day it could be utilized as part of the Greenway down 40 if it were, connected fully across the county. But, we try to keep our options open. So thank you.
That's great. Yeah, Diane did comment. And I think that both the county and the two municipalities are seeking for redevelopment of the 40 corridor. And there are examples where trail like this has been very effective in helping to motivate redevelopment. People can, see themselves living in an area where they can move around on a bike once you have the facility in, and sometimes that can help developers to get interested in redevelopment. And then I also saw one of our own here in Hartford, Deborah Price, chimed in, and appreciate that. She worked very hard on this along with the consultants, and very grateful for that. All right, that's all.
Patrick has his hand up, actually.
Oh, great. Please go right
Yeah, I
ahead.
saw the train station is one end of this, and I might have missed it, but I'm curious about sort of the connections there. I think that's going to be a really important connection to transit at that location.
Josh
Josh,
or
do you want to
Charlie?
speak to that? Yeah. Josh.
Yeah,
you get that.
and that's a great point. So that's the western terminus is in Aberdeen at the train station. So we didn't get into design details as to what that crossing would look like, because at this point, both of the preferred options are across the street from US 40 of the train station. So you'd have to cross US 40 to enter into the train station area. And I'm sure further stages of design could really touch on what kind of pedestrian intersection enhancements to kind of make it the gateway into that train station facility.
I think that might be it. All the questions. Thank you all so much. We enjoy presenting to you today.
Great, thank you so much. All right, the next item that we're turning to is UPWP activities. So we'll ask Zach Kaufman to join us to give us the update on Resilience 2050. Following that, Robert is going to give us the latest from the Maryland Travel Survey, walking in the Baltimore region. All right, Zach.
Sure, thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, just a quick update on Resilience 2050. We're kind of getting into the final stretches. First, I wanted to thank all committee members for their thoughtful reviews and comments on all the chapters. We really appreciate the time spent on that, and I think it'll really help to improve the document. So all chapters have been reviewed, except at least all drafted chapters have been reviewed, except for the executive summary, which was just sent out last week. We're currently integrating comments into the draft document, preparing for the launch of the public comment period. Appendix C, which relies on travel demand modeling and analysis, is in process. Some of that analysis is still being completed. The public comment period, as you know, starts on May 17th, extending through June 20th. I've been in conversation with all of you about the meeting times and locations, but as you know, BRTB and tech committee representatives generally attend those meetings and should be there. The BRTB representative has presented in the past and will continue to do so for Resilience 2050. We'll provide the presentation and the notes for that presentation. We're preparing advertisement materials, planning to advertise in local digital and print media, social media, newspapers, radio, a pretty robust advertisement campaign. We were also wondering and hoping that if we created a flyer for each jurisdiction with information on your specific meeting, would that be something you would be able and interested in distributing in your county government building as another means of advertisement?
And you
Yes,
can think
no?
about that. Yeah, and let us know in the next day or two, and we'll prepare those for you.
Yeah, so we are going to be preparing those, and our social media and communications folks are going to be preparing some social media content. So that's why I had asked previously for a social media coordinator contact. So we'll be sending kind of a packet of materials out to you all as the public comment period gets closer. So you've seen all this, but this is a summary of all of the meetings scheduled thus far. If you could take a quick look now or later and just confirm that everything is correct, I believe it is. But Carroll will be May 31st, Hartford will be June 5th, followed by Anne Arundel on June 6th, Baltimore County on June 7th, Baltimore City on June 12th, and Howard County on June 15th. I believe I still need room information for that one, David, but other than that, I think we're good to go. And we still need to schedule a meeting for Queen Anne's County. And I think that is all for now.
That's great. We'll switching over to Robert's slides. I'm sorry, were there any questions on this Resilience 2050?
No, but hey, this is Dan Janusik at MDOT. Could I just interject for a second?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave the meeting early, but I wanted to leave some federal grant information. You know, we put together a grants team at TSO to track discretionary grants and other grants that MDOT has applied for. And I was going to put 2 links in the chat, which would take you to those grant pages. Those will be updated regularly. So, you know, if you want to start, if you're starting to look for a grant, you're not sure where to go to start, you can always start here and then, you know, go through the federal pages, but it provides links to those pages too and some background information. So just want to share that with everybody before I leave the meeting. Thanks.
That's great. All right, it looks like we got Robert's slides up.
Okay.
All right.
Good morning.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that's great. Good morning. My name is Robert Berger. I work in BMC's data analysis group. Today, I will be sharing the results of a study of walking. This is a demographic analysis, and the results are presented for the Baltimore region rather than individual jurisdictions. It was my judgment that doing both a demographic analysis and a jurisdictional analysis would have produced an overwhelming amount of detail. Okay. That's not what I want to be looking at. All right. Okay, so first I'll describe who was walking by age group, by household income, and race and ethnicity. Next, I'll describe the trip purposes that walking is used for. And then finally, I will take your questions and comments. Okay. The largest shares of walkers are those 18 to 44 years old at 38.7%, and 45 to 64 years old at 26%. The next largest share of walkers are those 65 years or older. Smaller shares of walkers include those 5 to 12 years old at 9.7%, and teenagers 13 to 15 years old, 4.5%, and teenagers 16 to 17 years old, 1.9%. And I will add that it was my surmise that these teenagers may be driving instead. And of course, as usual, I prepare summary slides, so you have my comments. Okay. The largest share of walkers are those with the highest household incomes, 150,000 or more at 21.7%. The next largest shares are those with household incomes 100,000 to 149,999, 19.3%, and 50,000 to 74,999 at 16%. The next largest shares are those with household incomes 75,000 to 99,999, and household incomes less than 15,000 at 9.8%. Smaller shares are those with household incomes 15,000, 24,999 at 7.1%, and 35,000 to 49,999 at 6.4%. The remaining smaller shares of walkers have household incomes 25,000 to 34,999. And I will, to explain this trend, and I don't know the answer, but I wondered whether businesses may locate nearer affluent people, and that's why those with the most income do the most walking, because things are just closer to that. All right, so again, here's a summary slide. And the second summary slide. Okay. The largest share of walkers are whites at 72.4%. The next largest share of walkers are African Americans, blacks at 18.8%. A smaller share of walkers are Hispanic at 3.1% and Asian at 2.9%. A still smaller share of walkers are multiracial at 2.6%. The smallest shares of walkers include the following groups: American Indian, Alaskan Native at 0.1%, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander also at 0.1%. All right. Okay. And in case you can't read that, it says walking daily trips by trip purpose. The largest share of walking trips are for shopping and meals at 29.8%. The second largest share of walking trips are for personal, business, and other tasks at 27.8%. The third largest share are walking trips for work. And the fourth and fifth largest shares are for socializing and recreation and for school at 11.3% and school at 10.8%. And as I predicted, that was fast, and that's all I have. If there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them now.
All right. We'll appreciate these updates. Were there any other questions?
Robert, can I ask a kind of a suggestion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so so kind of wondering, maybe there is the, some, working people maybe from the residents. You guys have some, density, land use data associated with this one?
So I think the question is, yeah, could we locate the walking and whether or not it is more correlated with dense areas?
That's
and
right.
we could certainly look at doing some mapping of that, but yeah, I think it would make sense that, that kind of correlates.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it, but because it's a survey, but I suppose a big reason for the differences racially or just because the population is spread out that way with, larger proportion of whites, but it does seem like the proportion is of the population is higher, and that might get to land values and accessibility by pedestrian facilities, which could get us into an EJ kind of discussion, which would be good.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Maryland Travel Survey doesn't really have that kind of data. It's,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, also the kind of a mixed use, how it affect the walking. That's the kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, a while back, we actually did some traffic counts at multi-use centers, and it might be time to kind of go back and kind of think about that in terms of things like trip generation, since we're getting much more complex zoning that's starting to appear.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm also curious about, I guess, from the demographic pieces, you've got the percentages by income, but given the sizes of each of those income groups, my guess is that a much larger number of the folks that are walking are lower income, since you have smaller numbers of people in those higher income thresholds.
It's a reasonable question. Or a reasonable surmise, I would say.
Yeah, we could certainly look at some crosstabs, see.
All right,
That's great. Thank you very much.
thank you.
And item number 7 is discussion is the equity scan. The ICF team will share a work session with the Transportation Corps and continue feedback on key products. So we'll invite Sherry Stein to present this and whomever else she has on this.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. I, along with my colleagues, Hannah Twaddell and Haley Eggert, will be doing a presentation and an overview of the equity scan and process, which I discussed last month, our meeting with the Transportation Corps, preliminary recommendations, and a facilitated group discussion. So we will be doing some interaction at the end of this mini presentation. So let's talk quickly about the equity scan purpose and process, which I did go over briefly last month at the tech meeting, but I'm just going to let you know where we are at the moment. So we have done some preliminary work with interviews with BMC staff and reviewed the Unified Planning Work Program, the Long Range Transportation Plan, the Transportation Improvement Program, and the Public Participation Plan. And from our preliminary assessments and interviews, we have done a larger scan of MPOs across the country on all of these products to see what other MPOs are doing in the area of integrating equity in these products, these planning products. Next slide, please. Oh, we have some animation here. All right. So, the equity process, the project itself started back in the late fall, early winter, again, with reviewing of the plans, the peer MPO scan that we just completed. And now we're in the part where we are creating recommendations for this entire process. So, which is an exciting time. We've learned quite a bit from the MPOs that we have interviewed, as well as our internal scan. We had our brainstorming session with the BMC Transportation Corps the other week, April 26th, and that was a really robust conversation. And now we are before you again to talk a little bit and brainstorm about recommendations based on all of the feedback, all of the work, and the learnings that we have had to date. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what we learned from the Transportation Core meeting. So this was a really robust, interactive meeting where about 20 Transportation Core members participated. So that was a pretty high number. We started out with an Environmental Justice 101 video pop quiz. So BMC had a video on Environmental Justice 101. We had that sent around prior to the meeting, and to test their knowledge, we came up with several questions for them to interact with. We did provide an overview of the equity scan itself and where we are, what we've learned to date. And then we begin to break out 4 different areas for the Transportation Core to give us some feedback. We divided them out into plans and studies, needs assessment, funding decisions, and public participation. We used this terminology because it was a little bit easier to just digest than to necessarily talk about the planning products themselves. Each of these are related to planning products, but we thought that this was a good way to engage conversation. Now, what you see here on this slide is a process that we called Mural, which you are going to participate in later on this morning, where each individual was given an opportunity through facilitated discussions where we had breakout groups online and had an opportunity to post their ideas on electronic sticky on each of these areas. And as you see here, these are some examples of some of the ideas that was discussed and brought up forward with this group. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly overview some of the feedback. So as I stated before, we looked at 4 different categories. This slide shows some feedback that we received on plans and studies. So we have some ideas such as assessing how to increase public transit in corridors where traffic is most congested, partnering with colleges and universities to do other types of equity-related research that would perhaps feed into each of the 4 planning areas, planning strategies to interconnect local paratransit services. So as you can see here, it was a variety of different ideas that came out under this category for plans and studies. Needs assessments. Modified tools to include more diverse groups came out. Incorporate analyses and data on housing, health, and other related areas. Equity analysis tools, make them more accessible. These are just a few of the ideas that came out through this process under needs assessments. Funding, big one. Look for non-property tax sources for funding. Keep an eye out for federal funding, especially with the infrastructure bill. Leveraging funding from real estate developers. Few ideas that came out of that process. Public participation. So we had everything from compensating individuals who are involved in the public participation process to providing childcare at outreach events, and also getting more people involved and mobilizing for change and challenging people to become more motivated and involved and engaged in the transportation planning process. So these are just a few of the ideas from that process as well. So preliminary recommendations that came out of this process. And, first we want to look at what we're already doing, with the UPWP, conducting the equity scan, for example, which we're doing now, to updating the public participation plan with equity considerations, the Everyday Counts Academy, and of course the Transportation Core. So we know what we're already doing, which is commendable, but we have some preliminary recommendations that we really want to have you involved with to give us some feedback. So here's a few for UPWP, and this is just based on all of the work we've done to date. The first is to fund a large-scale survey of transportation needs of underserved communities, evaluate the potential impacts of emerging technologies on different populations, study the effects of past transportation decisions on current inequities. We've seen that, and a couple of MPOs are beginning to work on things along that line, and fund studies to address transportation safety and equity areas. Nationally, the statistics are showing that primarily minority, African American, and other people of color are more engaged in pedestrian and vehicle accidents than other groups in the country. Next slide, please. For the long-range transportation plan, 3 things have arisen that we've found. Creating a shared definition of what equity is, as well as supporting that definition through goals and strategies to advance equity in BMC's policies, practices, and activities. Developing a long-range transportation project selection criteria that addresses equity-related concerns, and prioritizing equitable multimodal transportation access to affordable housing, healthcare, and other essential destinations. So it's making that connection to transportation and land use, which was actually a question that was asked in one of the earlier presentations this morning. Next slide, please. The tip recommendations, increasing involvement and input from overburdened populations, developing graphics to highlight equity-related projects. Again, the grant funding from the bipartisan bill, adding equity criteria in the existing tip submittal process, and analyzing the distribution of benefits and burdens generated by tip investments. And this could be something where you historically go back maybe 10, 20 years to see how investments were funded and where those investments went. Next slide. Public participation, create maps, databases, and performance measures, study ways to expand opportunities for underrepresented populations, and engage and work with agency partners to leverage engagement in local and state initiatives. And examples is the City of Baltimore's Reconnecting Communities grant, the Bridge to Nowhere project. That's an excellent opportunity to begin to find some creative strategies to get those populations that are often hard to reach engaged in that process. Next slide. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Hannah Twaddell, who is going to lead a brief discussion.
Let me stop and see if there are any questions for Sherry before we launch our conversation. All right, feel free to drop questions into the chat anytime. We're going to stay on Zoom the whole time we do this little exercise. So we'll be able to see the chat and work with that. You can also communicate the way you normally do in Zoom by unmuting yourself to say something if you'd like. But this whiteboard tool, I imagine by now all of you have used some kind of tool like this, Google Jamboard, maybe Zoom's whiteboard. This is just another example of one. You saw a little graphic of this in the presentation. We used this tool the other night for the core meeting, and it went pretty well. One or two people, had difficulty accessing it because they were using Safari or something instead of Edge or Chrome, and it didn't quite work well for them. So if you have any difficulty getting into this whiteboard on your internet browser in a minute, just let us know. We'll be showing on the Zoom screen what's going on so that you can just type in the chat what you'd like to offer. But what we're going to do in just a minute, and I'll just explain it, and then we'll go into the whiteboard itself together and work with it, is that my colleague Haley Eggert is going to drop a link into our chat pod, and you can click on it or copy paste it to open it in a browser. Again, I would recommend use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, since this product interfaces pretty much through the Chrome platform, which Edge now uses. You should see a screen pretty quickly that opens up for you to give you the option to just type in your name or enter as a visitor. You can do either. And then you should see some screens that's showing up that have, I think the first one you'll see is some tips and tricks, and Haley's going to talk you through that, but then we'll have a little warm-up exercise just to get everybody familiar with the tool, where we list our name and our favorite comfort food in this case, and practice dragging a little star over to like other foods. Again, that's a warm-up exercise. Next slide. And then after the warm-up exercise,
just real quick,
we'll
Hannah.
actually dive in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hannah, I don't see the link to the mural board in the chat box yet. So we need to drop that in.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is available for not only tech members, but guests that are on the line. You can all do this.
Yes, everybody's welcome. Absolutely. Yep. Great, thank you. So Haley, if you want to drop the link into the chat while I'm finishing explaining this, the discussion topics I focus on will be those 4 planning products, and we're just asking you to brainstorm additional ideas, just like the core did the other day. And in this case, it's organized around the planning products that the study's organized around, simply because we know you all are familiar with those products. So I think without further ado, let's see if folks can get into the mural board. And Haley, if you want to, can Haley share her screen so that people can, if they want to monitors or something, they can, or Regina, if you're in the
yes,
in the mural
can
board,
do
you
that.
could share your screen. That'd be fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's have Haley share her screen. And as people are logging in, you can start your brief tutorial, Haley, and then we can do the little warm-up exercise. Just take a minute or two.
Yes, great. Are you seeing the screen on am I sharing my screen with the mural board?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to summon everybody over to where I am on the board. As people are getting in, I'll go over some logistics, and then we'll do the icebreaker so you can test it out yourselves. So first, as Hannah already mentioned, that Mural works best on either Chrome or Edge. So if you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat, or and if you can't get into the board, we'll just be happy to copy any text that you put in the chat over into the board, or type anything based off of what you verbally say if you unmute yourself. And as you see, you've all kind of come in as this little anonymous avatar. So the board does take your information in anonymously. And then for the biggest thing is to be able to figure out how to move around the board. And so my biggest recommendation to know how to do that is in the bottom right-hand corner, you should see a little navigation setting button. And there's 2 different ways that you might join the board. So trackpad mode or mouse mode. And so I'm using a trackpad on my laptop. So I'm using trackpad mode, which means I pinch in and out with 2 fingers to zoom in and out. And then using 2 fingers on my trackpad, I move up and down or left and right to move around the board. And then if you have a mouse, it's a pretty similar thing, but to zoom in and out, you'd use your mouse wheel, and to move around the board, you click on a white space and then drag around the board to move around. So you'll have a moment shortly to test that out. And then again, if you have any difficulties with the board, I'm monitoring the chat, so just let me know and I'll see if I can figure things out for you. And yeah, and so with that, I think we'll get started and moving over to the icebreaker so you guys can all test this out yourselves. It looks like some people have already started. Great. So I'm going to summon everybody over to the icebreaker. So to work in a sticky, you just double click in any empty sticky and you'll just put in your name and your favorite comfort food in this round. And then if you want to click and drag on a star and drag it over a sticky that you agree with their favorite comfort food perhaps. And then this is just what we'll be doing throughout the facilitated discussion and just shortly.
Sort of a fun exercise, if for no other reason it makes people look like names are a bit like Patrick Burritos. Who knew? It's a new name. I love this. You guys are doing great. You can tell it's a chilly day because a lot of people are listing warm food. When you do this exercise in the summer, everybody writes ice cream. And so the reason we're having you all play around with this a little bit is to just get comfortable with this particular whiteboard technology. You know, you can see you can move a square if you drag it. If we run out of squares, Haley will create more, but you can create more also just by clicking anywhere in the white space. It'll automatically create a new square. And you can sort of like others, which helps us later on when we're sort of trying to prioritize the input we're getting. For instance, you noticed earlier, Sherry gave you a summary of the main ideas from the core meeting. We had, you know, triple the number of actual entries than what you saw there, but we were pretty easily able to kind of roll them up because people, you know, we were able to look at upvotes and so forth. So clearly this group is definitely an ice cream, burritos, and pizza group. Good question. So Regina,
I
you can
love
take
the
that
chocolate.
into account.
I was just looking at the chocolate, Hannah. I'm like, I'm surprised there's not more stars on that one.
I know. So, but this definitely gives us a sense of what you should serve, Regina, if you're ever allowed to give this group lunch.
There you go.
At the end of the meeting.
I will take notes.
Why don't we? Yes, take notes. Let's go on over now to the discussion board, and we'll show you around. And so, Haley, if you can summon everybody over to the next section of the board. There we go. And again, some of you have already probably figured out, you know, if you're on a laptop like I am or desktop, if you just hold your left mouse key down, you can move around the board by yourself. If you have a scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. But what you should see here are the 4 different topic areas, and we're going to just open this up now for you all to type into any of them that you wish. We don't have to go through these in order, but the 4 topic areas we'd like to just brainstorm with you all on in terms of what kinds of studies or needs assessments or ideas you have around advancing equity would be through the UPWP. So we added an example there of equity emphasis areas and maps. Underneath the UPWP, the long range transportation plan. So this would be things like modeling tools, maybe some data sources, how we do our needs assessment, prioritization, et cetera. Sometimes, and often public participation, of course, overlaps with all of these, but the TIP similarly, that's more of a short-term programming process. So it's similar to the long-range plan, but there are some notable differences in the way we can evaluate equity impacts in a TIP and also engage people in the TIP process that are, have some subtle and not so subtle differences. And then finally, public participation. You all just went through a pretty major update of your public participation plan, out of which I think, things like the transportation core evolved. So you're already well here, but there's certainly plenty of room to keep going. And so partly based on last month's discussion, I think the comments people were giving us made me think about both kind of the bottom up and the top down. I know part of the feedback we got from the core, I think people chatted a little bit about really wanting to understand more what happens at the local level. So while I'm talking, I would invite you to go ahead and feel free to begin, clicking on sticky notes in any of these 4 categories, move around the board as you see fit, and start brainstorming ideas and dropping them in and adding stars to ideas that other people are typing. And we'll take about, maybe 8 minutes or so to do this more or less silently. If some of you, if you're having any trouble, drop an idea in the chat or just open your mic. But thank you. I'm seeing somebody typing in a study on land banking and TDR, transfer development rights, as a way to look at equity concerns or potential equity impacts that relate to that tool for growth management. That's a really interesting idea. So I'm seeing having more EJ criteria in the tip. I'm seeing.
And just quickly, for anybody who's still following me, just so you know, you can always at any point, I brought everybody together to see where I am, but you can, if you just move in and around the board, you'll stop following me and you can go wherever you want to go on the board.
See one coming in about bridging the gap between development partners and transportation options. Does that have to do with sort of like encouraging / enforcing the process of having private developers pay for transportation improvements like transit investments? And you can unmute and talk about that, the person who wrote that, if you'd like, and just explain so we understand what you're meaning there.
Yeah, Luciano here. I'm just thinking about how in a lot of cases, you have like retail jobs, service jobs that are built in very remote suburban areas that require typically low wage labor, but that, don't really pay well enough to support the kind of card center lifestyle that you need to live in those areas. And we're not really planning in a way that, like gets you from point A to point B regarding like the gap between how much people make versus how much they have to spend to live in a place.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I misspoke there. It was development patterns and transportation options. Yeah, it was really interesting just hearing what people were talking about when we were looking at the presentation on the walking study a few minutes ago, how a lot of your minds were already sort of heading in that direction of saying, this is interesting that the data appears that wealthier people seem to have more opportunities for walking potentially than poorer people, which is interesting because it's a little, I initially sort of wondered if it was, was this just recreational walking, but it's not. This was people walking for you know, shopping and meals and things. So that should have created some environments where if you can afford to live there, you can afford to walk more, which is better for your health and everything else. But it's one of those things you have to have money to even be able to access. Great.
Well, there's
Waterfront
also
remediation and development. That's a great one. Go ahead.
You might wonder if like the investment in facilities is an antecedent to gentrification. You know, it's
Yeah.
so that would be something to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be a complicated study.
Yeah, I'm going to just type that into the
Thank you.
while we're thinking here. Yeah.
Part
Research
of
tools,
what-
because this is something that I know, for instance, the San Francisco MPO, MTC, and I think Portland, Oregon does this as well, and one or two others are starting to create modeling tools and analysis tools that help to, I think for the most part, they call that the risk of displacement, which is sort of the code word for gentrification, which is a big, big, big problem in San Francisco, where the whole region is unaffordable to begin with. And they're trying to promote transit, but every time they promote transit, it's sort of like a Midas touch. You know, King Midas, everything he touched turned to gold, and life became unbearable because of it. So, you know, how do we? And so, of course, they're really getting engaged in California, particularly the MPOs there. And this is part of what the research we did for this project helped to show. They're really getting engaged in affordable housing issues within all the transportation agencies. And that's partly being enforced and run a lot by the state, too. It's a somewhat different environment than Maryland and Virginia. But there's lots of tools out there. Trends in senior housing and their walkability. Well, that's a wonderful one. I remember doing a study with AARP years ago in rural Cincinnati area, and they connected the dots that their area agency for aging, which everybody has, which did a lot of the development projects for new housing for older adults, was doing what we always do, which is try to find the cheapest land. And as it often happens with public schools, the cheapest land is out in the middle of nowhere. And so you've got lots and lots of senior housing in those rural and suburban areas that was completely inaccessible by anything but a car, and transit was really not cost effective. So they really shifted their thinking around maybe repurposing urban, even in small towns, urban centers. Yeah, wonderful. You know, supply and demand. If we don't build enough walkable, mixed-use, transit accessible neighborhoods, then the ones we have, law of supply and demand, can be very expensive. And I'm glad somebody wrote in the tip, and it shows up in some other places too, the whole issue of rural area transit. We had a very detailed discussion in the core meeting around that issue, particularly around paratransit. We got a really helpful description of the remarkable complexity of trying to use paratransit between one county and the next in this region, and that's a logistical, basically kind of a nightmare, because you have to get passes separately from every different county, and they have different expiration periods, and you have to keep reapplying. And so trying to literally make cross-county trips as a paratransit user is is a really complicated process, and it's a great opportunity for the MPO to take on, or the regional planning agency to take on, to see if there's a way to streamline that and make it easier. Digital billboards, that's an interesting one. Can the person who wrote that just describe what you're thinking about there?
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of ways to get to the general population anymore, and we have a number of those in the area.
Are you thinking about the ones like highway billboards that like rotate around? They're now.
Yeah, they're annoying, but they're out there.
Yeah, yeah, but they're effective. Yeah, and they're effective. They work. Yeah, that's a really good point. I was thinking of Facebook ads.
Well, it's just everything else
That's
is
also
so,
a digital billboard.
everything is so everything is so niche now. Everybody's looking at different things. There isn't, there aren't a lot of ways to get to everyone.
And thank you, somebody, for noticing. We also have an other activities category that I forgot to mention earlier, but somebody typed in a concept down there about looking at the very bottom of the screen, looking ahead about how connected and automated vehicle adoption may play out. Certainly right now with the electric vehicle space, we're very much seeing it. The Tesla generation, where the adopters of electric vehicles have all wealthy people. It's starting to get marketable, but still out of reach for a great number of people, still requires an automobile. That whole question of how we achieve a more energy efficient alternative fuels, maybe electric run system, is a rich opportunity for looking at opportunities to really prioritize equitable transportation access and not unintentionally, make it even more difficult to get around efficiently. This is great stuff. I know you need to close pretty soon because you need to go into your next session. So I think I'll just, you all can, you're welcome to continue typing in the board. At least we'll keep it open for a while, but certainly between now and the end of the meeting, if you have a thought and you want to hop back in while you're talking about other things, I don't encourage you to multitask, but we'll leave the board open and then collect it up after the meeting. And then if you have additional ideas, feel free anytime to reach out to Regina and let her know if you have more thoughts. But this has been very helpful input. Any other comments before we close out this discussion? Thank you again for all your input. I think, Regina, I will turn it back to you. And again, we'll just leave this board open and you all can continue adding if you wish, but I will give the time back over to Regina.
Hey, thanks, Hannah. Sherry, were there any other slides in the PowerPoint?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
To be continued, and thank you so much to our team from ICF. Joel, do you want to move on to other business?
Yeah. Thanks again, Haley, Sherry, and Hannah. And we'll our other business is to talk briefly about the next technical committee meeting, which is June 6th, and that's a virtual meeting. And I would like to propose that meeting start at 9 to accommodate other items. And so what I'll do with that is we'll just hear a consensus on that. So,
well, just real quick, Joel, if we could explain the reason we're suggesting this is
sure,
the June Tech Committee meeting is 45 minutes and we use the same link. It's immediately followed by the Congestion Management Committee. So what we'd like to do is start early with a closed session to discuss RFPs so that when our 45 minutes is up, we can roll directly into CMP. So that's why we're proposing to start early.
And so in order to do that, we don't have to do a motion and second. And so, a second, what we can do is just hear that as a consensus. So is there, can I hear people say aye if they are okay with the meeting starting at 9? Aye. Anyone else?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And anyone has any concerns about starting at 9, if they wanted to mention that, we could consider that. Okay, I didn't hear anybody with any concerns about starting at 9. So Regina, we can go ahead and set the agenda for starting at 9.
Hannah is going to leave the mural board open till 9, or excuse me, open till noon, even though in a moment we're going to close the session to everyone except for the tech committee. So if you can still work, even though we're in closed session.
Thank you everyone else for attending. And so now, hearing no other business, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to close the meeting.
Second, moved by Howard County.
Second by Annapolis.
Okay, great. Thank you both, David and Kwaku.